Hi, in a previous video we looked at how to sign up for Pear Deck free account and for how to get the add-on to work with Google Slides. So if you haven't done those two things, go back and do those two things now, check the other video. And from that point, in order to use Pear Deck, you're simply going to need a Google Slides presentation. So I've created one here for sample. So you open that up. And you can see that I have some content on this slide. I've kind of made my presentation, and now I want to make it more interactive. And this is where Pear Deck is going to come in handy. So before we start that process, let's just go over a couple of things. One is Pear Deck works on a freemium model, meaning that you can sign up for free and you can get certain functionality for free. And in the case of Pear Deck, you get a good amount of functionality. So it's really a very useful program without having to pay for it. The premium part of that model is that there are additional features that are accessible to you if you or your district opts to get a paid account. Like an individual buying an account, it's about $150 a year, but a lot of districts are opting into this now. They certainly get a much better price than that. So if your district is considering this and you really like the program, then maybe you should weigh in on it. There is a link, peardeck.com/pricing, and this would let you know what things you're getting on the free end and what things you would pick up from the premium end. Okay, next thing. When considering using Pear Deck is always going to be used with either a PowerPoint or a Google Slides presentation. Okay, so there's two different ways or two broad categories that we can use this in. One is asynchronous assignments. So where you're not working with the entire class at once. Okay, so you can either have Pear Deck running as you're teaching students, which would be synchronous, or you can kind of turn on this presentation and have students do it at different times. So some examples of when you might use it in an asynchronous environment would be for things like homework or makeup work. Maybe you have stations set up in your classroom and you want students to be doing different things in the classroom. You could use it in that environment. And certainly for remote learning, it's become very popular. Okay, now on the synchronous side, meaning the students are doing the work at the same time that you're involved in the presentation, the advantage is there. You might say, well, I'm up there and I'm doing a presentation anyway, so why do I need Pear Deck? Well, one of the advantages is it makes things very much more interactive. It can be difficult to engage the entire class. Some students don't like to volunteer. Even if they do want to speak out, or even if you call on them, it's one at a time. So there are a lot of techniques you can use with something like Pear Deck where everybody can participate simultaneously and you can have a good idea of what they're doing. So it really does help you foster full participation. Use it for things like check for understanding. So you're doing a lesson and you can insert a slide or have something midway just to stop to make sure that the class is coming along with you and is absorbing that content in the way you expect it. You can also use it at the end of a lesson as an exit ticket, a good way to collect some information very quickly in an organized way to see how effective the lesson was. Another good reason to use something like Pear Deck, as well as a lot of other technologies, is that it increases the novelty of the lesson. Students are in school for 180 days a year, and they may be sitting in 6 or 7 sessions a day. And that's a lot of content and a lot of activity. So I think we're all probably sensitive to the fact that mixing things up a bit can be a very, very effective way to help from students becoming desensitized. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch out and we're going to go through the different options that are available to you in Pear Deck. The first one would be a multiple choice response. So what I'd like you to consider here is that you may have all your content in your Google Slide presentation, but you don't have to. If you are doing a synchronous lesson where you were working with the class and presenting material, you could do that with a full class and simply have some of these checks built in to the presentation here as a way for you to get information, formative assessment very, very quickly and effectively. So here, the first option is multiple choice. Now to hook up this slideshow to Pear Deck, I am going to go to add-ons, and because I previously installed it, it's available here. So all I have to say is open Pear Deck add-on. It'll take just a second or two. It'll appear over here on the right. And you can see that there's a whole series of things that we want to look at. The first one we're going to look at is multiple choice responses. Now you can see perhaps I was up at the board, or I showed a movie, or we just had a discussion and we talked about the 13 original colonies and what they were. Now I want to know if students have a good idea of what geography that entailed. So my question here is, what was not one of the 13 original colonies? Okay, I'm going to click this second option here, which is choice, and it's just going to allow me to give some answer options. So I'm going to say New York. I am going to say Florida. I am going to say Vermont. And I'm going to have to add another option here. I'll just make this New Jersey. And update the slide. Now I think it'll probably be a good idea to see that from the student view. So what I will do is I will open an incognito window over here. And I'm going to start this lesson. I'm going to, instructor paste would mean that it's going out to students when I'm involved and when I push it out. If I say student paste activity, I can just turn this on and allow them to use it. So at this point for the demo, it doesn't make too much of a difference. But I'm turning it on now, initializing it. I'm going to copy this link. This is one way that I could have students access this. We'll get into the other ways in another video. And now I'm going to come in as a student and I'm simply going to paste that in there. And it's going to ask me to sign in. Okay, so I'm going to sign in here. Okay, and it's opened the presentation. The presentation is always going to open with this little check to see how everybody's feeling today. So am I feeling happy or meh or not so happy? And I do have the option to skip that here. Okay, so here's my presentation. That was my first slide. The way Pear Deck works on the student side is their controls will be along the bottom, which generally, for the most part, will be this advance button and the ability to go back and revisit old slides. So I click here. You can see I'm coming through the presentation that you just saw. And now I come up to this one. Response type, multiple choice. Which of the following was not one of the 13 original colonies? And that would be Florida. Okay, and then they would just advance on to the next slide. Now you can see this is an open-ended question, but I haven't gotten it set up yet. So let me just close this up. Now, by the way, it's going to be much better for you to kind of build everything out and then test it instead of doing it the way I'm doing it one at a time for purposes of this lesson. So the open-ended response, who were the major participants in the American Revolution? I'm just going to pick a text box here. And it's just going to add that text box for them to respond to. Now note that as I add these features, we get the little Pear Deck bar down at the bottom. And this is the whole key here. You can't really delete this, or actually if you delete it, you're just erasing whatever you put on here. Okay, so you want to leave this alone, especially if you're happy with the question. If I wanted to reset it, I could delete this and try to add something else. We have this open-ended question, so let's just flip over and see what that looks like. Okay, so here we are. My question's up on the left, who are the major participants, and this is just a box for them to type in. So they can put their answers over here and they can advance to the next question. Okay, the next question type is numerical. So this is something that's looking for an answer. You would get this simply by clicking on the number icon over here. Update the slide. Okay, let me flip over to the presentation. Here you go. Now, you may have noticed I clicked through one. As you're adding these things, they really don't update well on the fly necessarily. So I've just made duplicate slides so that we could be a little more efficient with this. So approximately how many, and then you enter a number in here. So that may be right or it may be wrong. Well, it's wrong actually, but you'll get that information when they submit it. Okay, next type after numerical is a draggable. So in this question, I might ask them, locate New Jersey. And then I come out here, let's see. Okay, and then I'm going to click this draggable feature. And I have my choice of icons that can be dragged. Now, in this case, I'm going to pick a flag. I can add another one. It's going to just keep adding the same one in different colors. You can have up to 5, but not more than 5. And they don't have to all be flags. So I could instead, pick a different symbol when I add them. Okay, you can of course remove them using the X over here on the left. And you can increase or decrease the size of your icon using the slider right here. Leave it about like that. And I'm going to update the slider. Let's go down and see what that looks like for the users. Well, you can see there it is. So there's my flag, and they can click it and they can plant it right where it needs to be, and you'll be able to see this on your end as they're completing their work. Okay. Okay, next type is drawing, and simply to have them draw something with their mouse or with touchpad or whatever else you're using, simply click the pencil. That will make this a drawing type response. Again, not a lot of options involved here. Okay, and you can see that this is what they get. They basically get the slide, so you want to leave a nice blank area here. They get color selections, quite a number. And there are a number of different tools that are in here. So right now the pencil is selected. There's also a highlighter. There's a line tool. So let me see if that might be useful for me right now. Well, that seems a little thick to me. I'm not going to really be able to finish that flag. So what I can do is I can erase it with the eraser. And this is my sizer. So I can make anything here, the text or the lines or the highlighter, the eraser, thicker or thinner using this. So I'm going to make it a little thinner. And let's just go with a black line. Nope, still pretty oh, sorry, I should have selected that tool first. There you go, that's a little better. And then I could make my flag. Now, as with this is a pretty terrible looking flag. Again, I can pick the eraser. Note that I can adjust the width on that separately. Make this a little easier to get to. And of course, my flag is out of proportion, but you get the idea that I can use the various lines and drawing tools, change the colors, change the sizes to get my drawing done. The other feature that's in here that we haven't looked at is the text. So I can pick a color for the text. I'm just going to click on the slide anywhere and say American flag 1776. Okay, so some simple drawing tools. It's not always the easiest thing to do on a computer, but for some applications I think it's worthwhile. You also have a trash can here. The trash can is not throwing away the slide, but simply clearing it, so that if they want to start over, they can do that easily. Okay, so we're going to flip back, and the next feature we're going to look at is how to embed a website in a page. Now, this is something where they're not necessarily going to have the direct option to respond by doing this, but that you're providing them with some information from an outside link. Okay, and then you can certainly use another slide to collect information about that if you'd like, but you're not going to do both simultaneously on the same slide. So in order to do that, you simply say embed a web page. You paste in the address here. You can see I had already done that in this case, so you just say I'll just say update, but you're just getting the address. Doesn't have to be on the slide here. I just left it here for myself, but you embed it in there. And then when they get to the slide itself, you can have your directions over here, and then this is the web page that they can go through. So it's good to have it pretty targeted because it is a live web page, so they simply can click and move all over the place. So you've got to give some thought to the design while you're setting that up, but it's a nice option. Okay, next feature is embedded audio. Okay, to embed audio, you simply click the Add Audio to Slide button. This is a premium feature, by the way, so this is, unless your district is considering buying it, this is probably something you don't want to get married to. There are other ways to put audio into Google Slides if it's really necessary. And you simply hit record. You record, what it is you want to say, hit pause, and then you either save or you can delete to start over. Then you're going to add that to the slide. I did a longer example on the next slide over here, so let me flip back. And you can see that, oops, sorry. You've got this audio included little tag up here at the top. Now that's a little confusing. That's letting them know it's there, but that's not how they play it. In order to play it, you're going to come down to the right corner, find these headphones, and open it up. And now you're going to see that there's a play button that you could play. Okay, and you can pause it, you can play it, you can jump around in it like you would expect. I probably don't want to mute it, just so that you don't forget that it's muted, but one more option. Okay, last thing I want to look at is something called the template library. You can see it says our template library right here, and these are just some pre-made slides that you might find useful. So I'm going to open that up, and you're going to see that the way they're organized, beginning of lesson, during lesson, end of lesson. So there's these components here that help you build out. Let's take a look for a second, like beginning of lesson. Things like what did you learn from your homework if you've applied, if you've asked students to do something in preparation for this lesson. Just questions to get them thinking. What do you wonder about today's topic? So just questions to get them thinking about what it is they're going to be doing, which is always a good idea. You've got some activities for during the lesson as well. These are generally checks for understanding. I think we saw a stretch break in here. So, different things that you could include. And then end of lesson, things like exit tickets, etc. Now, there are also, in another category of learning development, there are some activities for critical thinking. You can always check through there and see what those are. A little hard to see on the small screen here. And some stuff for SEL, social emotional learning, which is nice. Also, subject areas. Things for younger students, things in the math, science, social studies, world language, ELA area. These are good sometimes just for ideas. Okay, but you can see that here's an example of one that I pulled and put on this presentation. So let's see what it looks like from the student side. Okay, so it gives them the instructions up here and the tools that they need to annotate this particular diagram and to answer the question, etc. Okay, those are the basics of the tools and the things that are available to you through the program. In our final video, we'll look at how you manage the sessions and how you see the results, things along those lines.